a child's vest, glittering with eerie scales, sparks a deadly chase through a storm-soaked field, unraveling a chilling conspiracy. Will Eli be saved? Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell to catch our latest heart-pounding tale. Thunder cracked like a whip over Havens Creek, the wheat field trembling under a sky ready to burst, when Tom Harlan's sickle struck something that wasn't earth. His breath hitched as he clawed through the mud, unearthing a child's navy vest, its fabric crawling with shimmering fish scales that pulsed like a living thing. Each scale glinted with an unnatural sheen, sharp enough to slice his thumb, blood mixing with the rain. This wasn't just any vest, it was Eli Carter's, the 7-year-old who vanished after the elementary school's end-of-year ceremony a year ago, his absence a wound that festered in the town. Eli had been last seen clutching a paper crown from the ceremony, his grin wide as he waved to his mother, Clara, before slipping into the crowd. By nightfall, he was gone. No witnesses, no trace, only rumors of strange lights in the hills and whispers of something unnatural. Tom's heart slammed against his ribs as he spotted glass vials scattered around the vest, their blue contents glowing like liquid stars, swirling with menace. He grabbed one, its surface ice-cold, and shoved the vest into his jacket. A low, mechanical hum vibrated through the stalks, and 3 shadows emerged at the field's edge-cloaked figures, their movements too fluid, too silent, faces hidden under hoods that seemed to swallow light. Tom didn't think. He ran. The wheat slashed at his arms as he sprinted, mud sucking at his boots, the storm's first drops stinging his face. The hum grew louder, a relentless pulse, and the figures pursued with predatory grace, closing in faster than any man could. A glint of metal flashed in one's hand-curved blade, or something worse, its edge catching the lightning. Tom's lungs burned, but he veered toward the abandoned mill, its skeletal frame jutting through the fog like a forgotten god. He crashed through its doorway, the air thick with rot and rust, and dove behind a rusted turbine, clutching the vest so tightly its scales drew blood. The hum was deafening now, rattling his teeth, and the figures entered, their steps echoing with mechanical precision. A beam of light sliced the dark and held a device, not a flashlight, its beam pulsing blue like the vials. Tom's mind raced. Eli's disappearance had shattered Havens Creek. The school ceremony had been a joyful day, kids in paper crowns parading under balloons, but Eli never made it home. Clara's screams at the police station, the futile searches, the posters fading on lampposts, it all flooded back. Whatever these vials were, they were tied to Eli, and these shadows wanted them buried. Tom crawled toward a shattered window, glass biting his palms, and hurled himself into the storm, landing hard in the mud. The hum spiked, and a searing pain tore through his neck, a dart, its tip glowing blue, poison spreading like fire. His vision swam, but he staggered toward town, the vest his lifeline. The police station was a mile away, a crumbling beacon in a town that had lost hope. Behind him, the figures flickered through the rain, their forms warping like heat waves. A truck's headlights pierced the dark old man Kessler, cursing as he swerved. Tom thrust the vest and a vial into Kessler's hands, gasping, "Reese! Police! Now!" Kessler's eyes widened, recognizing the vest from a year of grief, and gunned the engine. Tom turned, facing the shadows, the dart's venom pulling him under. One figure raised a weapon, its barrel humming with that same blue glow, and fired. Pain exploded in Tom's chest, but he roared, charging with his sickle, slicing into a cloaked arm. The figure recoiled, leaking not blood but a viscous, glowing fluid. Tom collapsed, the hum swallowing his senses, Eli's paper crown flashing in his mind. At the police station, Captain Sarah Reese stared at the vest on her desk, scales glinting like a warning. Kessler's story was chaos. Tom ambushed, bleeding out, shadowy attackers. Sarah had led the search for Eli, a case that cost her sleep, her marriage, her faith. The ceremony haunted her, Eli's laughter, his crown slipping as he ran to Clara. Then nothing. Hundreds searched the woods, divers scoured the creek, but Eli was a ghost. Now this vest, these scales, this vial. She cracked the vial's seal, and a faint hum filled the room, the liquid writhing like it was alive. Her radio crackled. Tom was in surgery, critical. Sarah's blood boiled. She strapped on her holster, grabbed the vest, and rallied her Team 4 officers, all locals, all scarred by Eli's loss. Outside, the storm howled, but Sarah's voice cut through it. Whoever took Eli is still here, and they're scared. We end this tonight. She didn't know what the scales meant, or why the vial hummed, but she knew evil when she saw it. The station's lights flickered, and for a moment, she swore the scales moved. Rain lashed Havens Creek as Captain Sarah Reese led her team through the storm, the child's vest tucked inside her jacket, its scales pricking her skin through the fabric. The police station's flickering lights were a fading memory, replaced by the roar of wind and the crunch of gravel under their boots. Sarah's flashlight cut through the fog, illuminating the path to the wheat field where Tom Harlan had found the vest. Now a crime scene cordoned off by sodden tape. Her team officers Daniels, Lopez, Nguyen, and Rookie Carter, no relation to Ella, moved in tight formation, their faces grim, guns drawn. Eli's disappearance had gutted them all, but Sarah carried the heaviest weight. She'd promised Clara Carter answers. Standing in the school auditorium the night Eli vanished, the stage still littered with paper crowns from the ceremony. A year later she had nothing but sleepless nights, and a town that looked at her with pity. Now this vest, those vials, that humid was a lead, and she'd tear the hills apart to follow it. The field was a mess, wheat trampled where Tom had fled, the air heavy with the scent of ozone and something sharper, like bleach gone wrong. Sarah knelt, her beam catching glints of Glassmore vials, half shattered, their glowing contents seeping into the mud. Nguyen bagged a fragment, his hand steady despite the tremor in his voice. "This isn't drugs, Captain. This is something else." Sarah nodded, her gut twisting. The scales on the vest weren't fish scales. Not exactly, they were too uniform, too alive, shifting under light like they held a pulse. She stood, scanning the horizon, when Daniels hissed, "Movement, 2 o'clock." Shadows flickered at the field's edge, just beyond the tape, too fast for the storm's sway. Sarah's hand tightened on her Glock, her pulse a war drum. "Fan out, stay sharp," she ordered, voice low. The team spread, flashlights sweeping, but the shadows vanished, leaving only the hum, faint but growing, burrowing into their skulls. Lopez cursed, clutching his temple, and Carter's eyes darted like a cornered animal's. Sarah pushed forward, drawn to a patch of flattened wheat where Tom's sickle still lay, its blade stained with that same viscous, glowing fluid from his attackers. She froze a footprint, too large, its edges webbed like a frog's, pressed deep into the mud. Before she could call it in, the hum spiked, and the ground trembled. A trap, vines of metal erupted from the soil, barbed and writhing, snapping like whips. Sarah dove, tackling Carter out of the way as a tendril grazed her arm, tearing through her sleeve and drawing blood. Daniels fired, his shot sparking off the metal. "Useless. Fall back," Sarah yelled, but the vines were everywhere, herding them toward the hills. Nguyen screamed, a tendril coiling around his ankle, dragging him into the dark. Lopez lunged, hacking with his knife, but another vine knocked him flat. Sarah's mind raced Eli, the vest, the vials. This tech-it was all connected, and they'd walked right into it. She grabbed Carter, shoving him toward the road. "Get to the station, call for backup." The rookie hesitated, then ran, his flashlight bobbing into the fog. Sarah turned, firing at the vines, each shot buying seconds. Nguyen was gone, his screams cut off, and Lopez was bleeding, dragging himself toward her. She hauled him up, half carrying him as they sprinted for the tree line, the hum now a deafening roar. The vines slowed, as if tethered, but Sarah's relief died when she saw the hills. A structure loomed, half hidden by Mr. Concrete bunker, its entrance pulsing with that same blue glow. No one in Havens Creek knew this was here, not even the old-timers. Sarah's radio crackled, Carter's voice frantic. "Backup's coming, but Captain, there's something in the town records. A lab, shut down decades ago, tied to the coast. It's near you." Sarah's blood ran cold. The coast meant the smuggling rings, the ones Eli's father, a retired fisherman, had tangled with before quitting. She glanced at Lopez, his face pale, and made the call. "We're going in." They stumbled toward the bunker, the hum vibrating in their bones, and found its door ajar, blue light spilling out. Inside was a nightmare. Tanks of murky water lined the walls, shapes floating within, human but wrong, their skin glistening with scales. A console flickered, displaying data. Subject E7, Viability confirmed. Sarah's heart stopped. E7. Eli. Footsteps echoed deeper in, and Sarah raised her gun, Lopez limping beside her. A figure stepped into the light knot, a shadow, but a man in a lab coat, his eyes cold as the vials. "You shouldn't be here, Captain," he said, his voice calm, almost amused. Before Sarah could respond, the hum surged, and the tanks began to crack, water flooding the floor. Shapes stirred within, clawing at the glass, their scaled hands reaching for freedom. Water gushed from the cracked tanks, flooding the bunker's floor with a sickly glow, the air thick with the stench of brine and chemicals. Captain Sarah Reese gripped her Glock, her boots slipping as she backed away from the stirring shapes in the tank's humanoid, scaled, their webbed claws scraping glass with a sound like nails on chalk. Officer Lopez, blood soaking his sleeve, leaned against her, his knife trembling in his hand. The man in the lab coat stood unflinching, his cold eyes locked on Sarah, a faint smile curling his lips as the hum pulsed louder, shaking the walls. "You're too late, Captain," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Sarah's mind raced. Subject E7, Eli, the vest. The scales. This was no smuggling ring. This was a lab, alive and monstrous, and Eli was its heart. She aimed at the man, her voice steel. "Where's the boy?" He tilted his head, amused, then tapped a device on his wrist. The tanks shattered in a deafening explosion of glass, and the creatures lunged. Sarah fired, her bullets tearing into the nearest one, its scales glinting as it screeched, a sound that clawed her soul. Lopez swung his knife, slicing a webbed arm, but another creature tackled him, pinning him under water. Sarah dove, yanking it off, her fists pounding its slick, unyielding hide until it recoiled. She dragged Lopez up, gasping, but the man was gone, vanished into the bunker's depths. The creatures, 5, maybe 6 circled, their eyes glowing blue like the vials, movements jerky but coordinated, like puppets on strings. Sarah's radio crackled. Carter's voice faint. "Backup's 10 minutes out, Captain." 10 minutes was a lifetime. She grabbed Lopez, shoving him toward a rusted stairwell. "Move." They climbed, the creature's claws scraping below, water rising fast, lapping at their heels. The stairwell led to a corridor lined with flickering monitors, each displaying grainy footage. A child in a tank, tubes in his arms, scales creeping over his skin. Sarah's stomach churned Eli, his face pale, eyes wide with terror. Another monitor showed a coastal facility, waves crashing against steel walls, and a name, Aquarelle Project. Lopez coughed, clutching his side. "They're making them. Hybrids." Sarah nodded, her jaw tight. The vest's scales, the vials, the webbed footprint, it was all here. A twisted experiment to merge human and sea. They pushed deeper, the hum now a physical weight, pressing their skulls. The corridor split, one path descending into darkness, the other blocked by a sealed door, its panel pulsing blue. Sarah slammed her fist against it, but it didn't budge. A screech echoed behind. 2 creatures had followed, their claws gouging the walls. Lopez braced himself, knife raised, but Sarah saw the trap. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, spraying foam to blind the creatures, then kicked a loose pipe, sparking wires overhead. Electricity arced, hitting the water below, and the creatures convulsed, collapsing in a heap. Lopez stared, panting. "Nice one, Cap." But Sarah was already at the panel, prying it open with her knife. Wires sparked, and the door groaned, inching upward. Beyond was a lab, sterile and vast, tanks lining the walls, each holding a figure children, adults, all scaled, all still. At the center, a console blinked, data streaming. E7, neural sync complete. Sarah's heart pounded. Eli was alive, but changed. Footsteps clattered, and the man in the lab coat reappeared, flanked by 2 armed guards, their rifles humming with blue energy. "You're persistent," he said, "but you're not leaving." Sarah raised her gun, but a guard fired, the blast grazing her shoulder, searing her flesh. She ducked behind a tank, glass cracking under the impact, and returned fire, hitting a guard's leg. Lopez threw his knife, catching the other in the shoulder, but the man in the lab coat was moving, typing on the console. The hum spiked, and the tanks vibrated, more creatures waking. Sarah lunged, tackling the man, her gun to his temple. "Stop it now," he laughed, blood trickling from his lip. "You can't stop progress, Captain. E7 is ours." A tank hissed open behind her, and a small figure stumbled out, scales glinting, eyes glowing blue. Eli, or what was left of him. Sarah's breath caught, her gun wavering. The boy's voice was a rasp, barely human. "Help me." The man shoved Sarah off, bolting for a side exit, but Lopez tackled a guard, wrestling for his rifle. Sarah scrambled to Eli, catching him as he collapsed, his skin cold, scales cutting her hands. The hum was unbearable, the remaining tanks cracking, creatures stirring. She hoisted Eli, his weight featherlight, and ran for the door, Lopez covering her, firing at the guards. The bunker shook, lights flickering, as they burst into a tunnel, the exit a faint glow ahead. Behind, the creatures screeched, their claws echoing, and Sarah knew the man in the lab coat wasn't done. Eli's hand twitched in hers, a spark of the boy he'd been, and Sarah swore she'd burn this place down to save him. The tunnel's walls pulsed with the same blue glow as the vials, their hum a relentless assault on Sarah Reese's senses as she carried Eli, his scaled skin cold and slick against her arms, his shallow breaths barely audible over the screeches echoing behind. Officer Lopez limped ahead, his stolen rifle spitting blue energy bursts at the pursuing creatures, each shot illuminating their webbed claws and glowing eyes in the dark. The tunnel sloped upward, the air growing salty, hinting at the coast, but the exit was a distant pinprick of grey light, and the creatures were gaining, their movements a grotesque blend of human and marine, claws gouging the concrete. Sarah's shoulder burned where the guard's blast had grazed her, but she tightened her grip on Eli, his small frame trembling, a faint whimper escaping his lips. "Stay with me, kid," she whispered, her voice fierce despite the fear clawing her chest. Lopez glanced back, his face pale, blood dripping from his side. "Captain, they're too fast." He fired again, hitting a creature's shoulder, its screech rattling the tunnel, but it barely slowed. Sarah's mind raced the lab, the tanks, the man in the lab coat calling Eli E7. This was no random experiment. It was targeted, and Eli was the prize. The tunnel shook, dust raining from the ceiling, and a new sound joined the chaos, waves, crashing somewhere close. The coast was Havens Creek's lifeblood, its fishing boats and smuggling rumors tied to Eli's father, Jonah Carter, a man broken by his son's loss. Sarah had seen Jonah at the school ceremony, watching Eli with pride, unaware it was their last moment. Now, she wondered if Jonah's past held the key. The tunnel widened, opening into a cavern where seawater pooled, reflecting the blue glow of vials embedded in the walls like stars. A rusted ladder led to a hatch above, the exit to the coast, but three creatures blocked their path, their scales glinting, jaws snapping with needle-like teeth. Lopez raised his rifle, but Sarah grabbed his arm. "Save the shots." She set Eli down, his eyes flickering with a hint of recognition, and pulled a flare from her belt. "Cover your eyes," she hissed, igniting it. The cavern blazed red, the creatures shrieking, clawing at their faces. Sarah scooped Eli up, sprinting for the ladder, Lopez firing sparingly to keep the creatures at bay. She climbed, Eli's weight dragging her down, the hum vibrating in her bones. Lopez followed, but a creature lunged, snagging his leg. He kicked, cursing, and fired point blank, the creature's head exploding in a spray of glowing fluid. They reached the hatch, Sarah shoving it open, sea air hitting her like a slap. They emerged on a rocky cliff, waves crashing below, the storm still raging. A coastal path led to town, but a new threat waited. Two boats, sleek and black, cutting through the water, their decks bristling with armed figures. The labcoat man's voice echoed in Sarah's mind. "You're not leaving." She ducked behind a boulder, Eli shivering in her arms, Lopez panting beside her. "They knew we'd come this way," he rasped. Sarah nodded, scanning the cliff. A fishing shack sat nearby, its door ajar. Jonah's old place, abandoned since Eli's disappearance. "There," she said, pointing. They ran, Lopez covering their rear, the boat's spotlight sweeping the rocks. Inside the shack, nets and rusted tools littered the floor, the air thick with salt and grief. Sarah set Eli on a cot, checking his pulse weak, but steady. His scales shimmered, but his eyes, though glowing, held a spark of the boy from the school ceremony. Lopez barricaded the door, his rifle trained on it. "We can't hold them long, Cap." Sarah's radio crackled Carter, the rookie, shouting, "Backup's at the bunker, but it's a war zone. Captain, Jonah Carter's here, says he knows the Coast Lab." Sarah's heart leapt. Jonah. She grabbed the radio. "Get him to the cliff now." Minutes later, a truck roared up, Jonah leaping out, his face haggard, eyes wild. He froze, seeing Eli, and fell to his knees, sobbing. "My boy." Sarah pulled him up. "Jonah, what do you know?" He wiped his eyes, voice shaking. "Years ago I ran goods for a group vials, like the ones Tom found. They paid well, no questions. After Eli vanished, I found a map in my old gear, leading to a lab under the sea. I thought it was nothing, but—" He trailed off, staring at Eli's scales. Sarah's blood ran cold. The smuggling ring, the vials, the coastal labit was all connected, and Jonah had been part of it. Spotlights hit the shack, boots crunching outside. Jonah grabbed a harpoon from the wall, his fisherman's strength returning. "I'll get you to the boats," he said. Sarah nodded, lifting Eli. Lopez kicked the door open, firing, dropping a guard. They sprinted for Jonah's old boat, docked nearby, bullets pinging off rocks. Jonah shoved the engine to life, waves rocking them as they sped into the dark, the lab's boats in pursuit. Eli stirred, whispering, "Dad." Jonah gripped his hand, tears falling, and Sarah knew the fight was far from over. Waves crashed against Jonah's boat, the engine roaring as it sliced through the storm, Havens Creek's cliffs fading into the mist behind them. Captain Sarah Reese crouched beside Eli, his scaled body shivering under a tarp, his glowing eyes half closed, each breath a faint rasp. Jonah gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, tears mixing with sea spray as he glanced at his son, the boy he'd failed after the school ceremony a year ago. Officer Lopez knelt at the stern, his stolen rifle trained on the black boats pursuing them, their spotlights cutting through the dark like knives. Bullets pinged off the hull, one grazing the rail, sending splinters flying. Sarah's shoulder throbbed, her wound bleeding through her jacket, but she pushed the pain down, checking Eli's pulse weak, unsteady, but there. His scales pulsed faintly, as if synced with the hum still vibrating in her skull, a reminder of the lab and its horrors. "Faster, Jonah," she shouted, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Jonah cursed, coaxing the engine, but the enemy boats were sleek, built for speed, closing the gap with mechanical precision. Lopez fired, his shots sparking off their hulls, but a blast from their lead boat hit the stern, wood exploding, the impact throwing Lopez against the rail. He grunted, blood trickling from his temple, but kept firing, his aim steady despite the rocking deck. Sarah grabbed a flare gun, firing into the sky, its red glow a desperate signal to any Coast Guard or backup from Havens Creek. The flare illuminated the sea, revealing a shadow beneath the waves, something massive, moving too fast, its outline rippling with scales. Her stomach dropped. The lab wasn't just on land, it was here, in the deep. Jonah saw it too, his fisherman's instincts kicking in. "Hold on," he yelled, veering the boat toward a cluster of jagged rocks, the only cover in the open water. The enemy boats split, flanking them, their spotlights blinding. A voice crackled over a megaphone, cold and familiar the man in the lab coat. "Return E7, and you live." Sarah's blood boiled. She leaned over Eli, whispering, "You're not theirs, kid." His hand twitched, fingers curling around hers, scales cutting her palm. The boat lurched as Jonah navigated the rocks, waves slamming the hull, but the shadow in the water circled closer, its hum now a deafening pulse. A tentacle-scaled, glistening burst from the sea, slamming the lead enemy boat, metal screeching as it capsized, screams drowned by the storm. Sarah froze, Eli's eyes widening, glowing brighter, as if linked to the creature. Lopez shouted, "What the hell is that?" But Sarah had no answers. The second boat fired, not at them but at the water. Blue energy blasts illuminating a massive form-part machine, part beast, its body studded with vials, scales matching Eli's. The lab had built this, a guardian or a weapon, and Eli was its key. Jonah swerved, the boat scraping rocks, nearly tipping, but he righted it, shouting, "There's a cove ahead." Sarah nodded, scanning the horizon. The cove was a smuggler's hideout, tied to Jonah's past, and maybe their only shot. The creature dove, the enemy boat's blasts missing, and for a moment, the pursuit faltered. They reached the cove, its narrow entrance shielding them from the open sea. Jonah cut the engine, the boat drifting into shadows, the hum fading but not gone. Lopez collapsed, clutching his side, blood pooling. Sarah tore her sleeve, bandaging him, her hands shaking. Eli stirred, his voice a whisper. "It knows me." Sarah's heart clenched. She didn't know if he meant the creature or something worse. Jonah knelt beside Eli, his voice breaking. "I should have stopped them, son. The vials, the smuggling, I didn't know." Sarah grabbed his shoulder. "Focus, Jonah. Where's this lab you mapped?" He pulled a crumpled paper from his jacket, its edges worn, marking a spot miles offshore a platform, hidden by currents, tied to the Aquarelle project. The hum returned, louder, and the cove's water rippled. The creature was here. Sarah loaded the flare gun, her eyes on the entrance, when a new sound cut through rotors. A Coast Guard chopper, drawn by her flare, its spotlight sweeping the cove. Relief surged, but the enemy boat appeared, blocking the entrance, its weapons trained on them. The creature erupted, tentacles smashing the boat, metal crumpling like paper, but a stray blast hit the chopper, sending it spiraling into the sea. Sarah's hope shattered. Jonah restarted the engine, shouting, "We hit the platform, end this." Sarah nodded, lifting Eli, his scales glowing brighter, as if calling the creature. The boat sped out, the cove exploding in chaos tentacles, gunfire, waves. Lopez fired his last shots, collapsing, and Sarah took the rifle, her aim steady despite the blood loss. The platform loomed, a steel fortress rising from the sea, its lights pulsing blue. Eli's eyes locked on it, a single word escaping, home. Sarah's resolve hardened. She'd tear that place apart to free him, even if the sea itself fought back. The platform loomed like a steel beast in the storm, its blue lights pulsing through the rain as Jonah's boat slammed through the waves, engine screaming. Captain Sarah Reese clutched Eli, his scaled skin cold under her hands, his glowing eyes flickering with fear and something deeper recognition. Jonah gripped the wheel, his face etched with guilt, navigating toward the structure that held answers to his son's torment. Officer Lopez slumped against the rail, blood seeping through his bandage, his rifle empty, his breaths ragged but defiant. The enemy boat was gone, sunk in the cove's chaos, but Sarah knew the platform was no sanctuary. It was the heart of the Aquarelle project, where Eli became E7. Her shoulder burned, her vision blurring from blood loss, but she focused on Eli's faint pulse, her promise to Clara Carter fueling her. The platform's dock emerged, a concrete slab slick with seawater, guarded by 4 figures in tactical gear, their rifles humming with blue energy. Sarah's flare gun was spent, her Glock low on rounds, but retreat wasn't an option. Jonah cut the engine, letting the boat drift silently, waves masking their approach. "We hit hard. Get inside," Sarah whispered, her voice steady despite the odds. Lopez nodded, gripping a rusted pipe from the deck, his eyes fierce. Jonah tied the boat, his fisherman's hand steady, and pulled a flare from his gear. "For distraction," he said, voice raw. Sarah lifted Eli, his weight a reminder of the boy from the school ceremony, now a shadow of himself, scales glinting like a cruel mockery. They crept onto the dock, rain cloaking their steps, and Jonah lit the flare, hurling it toward the guards. It blazed red, drawing their fire, and Sarah charged, tackling the nearest guard, her knife slicing his wrist, disarming him. Lopez swung his pipe, cracking another's helmet, while Jonah wrestled a third, his strength born of years at sea. The 4th guard fired, the blue blast grazing Sarah's leg, pain searing, but she rolled, shooting him in the knee. The guards down, Lopez grabbed their rifles, tossing one to Sarah. They dragged the guards into the shadows, binding them with rope from the boat. Eli stirred, whispering, "Inside. They're waiting." Sarah's gut twisted. Someone knew they were coming. The platform's entrance was a steel door, its panel glowing blue, locked tight. Lopez pried it open, wires sparking, and the door groaned upward, revealing a sterile corridor lit by flickering fluorescence. The air was sharp with chemicals, the hum now a low buzz, emanating from deep within. Sarah carried Eli, Lopez, and Jonah flanking her, their stolen rifles raised. The corridor led to a control room, consoles blinking, monitors showing data. E7, neural integration stable. Sarah's heart sank. Eli was wired to this place. His scales a product of their tech. A glass wall separated them from a lab, where figures moved humans, not creatures, their skin patched with scales, eyes vacant, hooked to machines pumping blue liquid. Sarah recognized one, a local who'd vanished months ago, now a test subject, his movements mechanical. Jonah choked. They're like Eli. Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared, red lights flashing. A voice echoed over speakers. The lab coat man. You're persistent, Captain, but E7 belongs to us. Doors slammed shut, trapping them, and gas hissed from vents, stinging their eyes. Sarah covered Eli's face, her lungs burning, and kicked a console, sparking it, hoping to jam the system. Lopez fired at a vent, slowing the gas, but footsteps echoed. Guards, more than before, closing in. Jonah smashed a monitor, revealing a hidden panel with a map. The platform's core, a chamber below, marked E7 containment. Sarah's mind raced. Eli was the key, but to what? She grabbed a vial from a desk, its blue liquid matching Eli's scales, and slipped it into her pocket. The gas thickened, her vision swimming, but she saw a shadow move behind the glasser woman, unscaled, her face familiar. Clara Carter, Eli's mother, her eyes hollow, holding a syringe. Sarah's blood ran cold. Clara? The woman stepped forward, voice flat. They promised to save him. Jonah roared, lunging, but Clara raised the syringe, and guards burst in, rifles trained. Sarah shielded Eli, her gun raised, but Clara's words cut deeper than any bullet. I gave them Eli to save him from the sickness. Sarah's mind reeled. Clara had been part of this, drawn in by lies, betraying her own son. Lopez tackled a guard, resting his rifle, and Sarah fired, dropping another, but Clara lunged, syringe aimed at Eli. Sarah dove, taking the needle in her arm, pain exploding as the liquid burned through her veins. Jonah tackled Clara, pinning her, tears streaming as he begged, Why? Clara's face crumpled, guilt breaking through. They said he'd die otherwise. The gas cleared, the alarm silenced, but the lab coat man's laughter echoed over the speakers. E7's purpose is greater than you know. Sarah staggered, the syringe's effects clawing her mind, but she lifted Eli, his eyes pleading. The guards regrouped, and Sarah knew they had one shot to reach the core, destroy the project, and save Eli, even if it cost everything. The platform trembled under Sarah Reese's boots, the hum of the Aquarelle project's machinery, a relentless pulse as she staggered through the corridor, Eli cradled in her arms, his scaled skin glinting under flickering lights. Her arm burned where Clara's syringe had pierced it, the blue liquid searing her veins, clouding her thoughts with flashes of pain and strange, fleeting images, waves, scales, a child's scream. Jonah dragged a sobbing Clara, his face a mask of betrayal and grief, his fisherman's strength barely holding him upright after learning his wife had handed Eli to the lab. Lopez limped behind, clutching a stolen rifle, blood dripping from his wounds, his eyes darting to the shadows where guards could emerge. The control room's alarms still wailed, red lights strobing, but Sarah's focus was singular. The core chamber, marked E7 containment, on the stolen map, where Eli's fate and the truth waited. The corridor sloped downward, the air growing colder, thicker with the chemical tang of the blue vials. Eli stirred, his glowing eyes meeting Sarah's, a whispered, "Sorry," escaping his lips, as if he blamed himself for the nightmare. Sarah's heart twisted. She saw the boy from the school ceremony, paper crown askew, not this broken shell. "We're getting you out," she growled, shoving the pain in her arm aside. The corridor ended at a blast door, its surface scarred, glowing blue panel locked tight. Lopez slammed his rifle's butt against it, sparks flying, but it held. Clara, voice hollow, muttered, "It needs a code. I know it." Jonah shook her, rage in his eyes. "Then give it, Clara. Fix this." She flinched, tears falling, and whispered numbers 7 to 3, -2, -9. Sarah punched them in, the door hissing open, revealing a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. walls lined with tanks pumping blue liquid into tubes that converged on a central platform. There, strapped to a chair, was a machine, wires and needles piercing a figure, Eli's double, scaled, eyes vacant, but not Eli. Sarah's stomach lurched a decoy, or a clone. The lab coat man stood beside it, his smile cold, flanked by 6 guards, their rifles humming. "Welcome, Captain," he said, tapping a console. E7's evolution is complete. Sarah set Eli down behind a tank, her gun raised, the syringe's poison making her aim shaky. "He's a boy, not your experiment." The man laughed, gesturing to the tanks, where scaled figures townsfolk, missing for months floated, wired to the system. They're the future, adapted for a drowning world. Lopez fired, hitting a guard, but the others returned fire, blue blasts shattering a tank, liquid flooding the floor. Sarah dove, dragging Eli, her legs screaming from the earlier graze. Jonah tackled Clara behind a console, shielding her despite his fury, and yelled, "The machines shut it down." Sarah saw it, the console pulsing, controlling the tanks. Maybe Eli's scales. She sprinted, bullets grazing her, and slammed her knife into the console, sparks erupting. The hum faltered, the decoy spasming, but the man lunged, a syringe in hand, aiming for Sarah. Lopez tackled him, taking the needle in his shoulder, collapsing with a groan. Sarah roared, shooting the man in the leg, pinning him. The guards closed in, but Clara, breaking free, grabbed a rifle, firing wildly, her screams raw guilt, love, rage. 2 guards fell, but a blast hit her chest, and she crumpled, Jonah catching her, sobbing. Sarah reached the console, ripping wires, the tanks shutting down, scaled figures slumping lifeless. Eli's scales dimmed, his breathing easing, but the platform shook, steel groaning, self-destruct, triggered by the sabotage. The man laughed, blood pooling. "You've doomed yourselves." Sarah lifted Eli, Lopez staggering up, and Jonah carried Clara's body, his face shattered. They ran, guards firing, the chamber collapsing, debris falling. A side tunnel led upward, the hum dying as the platform buckled. They burst onto the dock, the storm raging, Jonah's boat their only hope. Sarah shoved Eli aboard, Lopez collapsing, his pulse weak. Jonah set Clara down, kissing her forehead, and started the engine, guards' bullets pinging off the hull. The platform exploded behind them, fire lighting the sea, the man's laughter silenced. Sarah held Eli, his scales flaking, his eyes human again. But the cost Clara, Lopez's fading breath, the townsfolk lost cut deeper than any wound. The boat sped toward Havens Creek, the dawn breaking, and Sarah swore the truth would see light, for Eli, for them all. Dawn broke over Havens Creek, painting the sea gold as Jonah's boat limped toward the harbor, its hull scarred from bullets and fire. Captain Sarah Reese knelt beside Eli, his small frame wrapped in a blanket, his scales flaking away like ash, revealing pink, human skin beneath. His eyes, no longer glowing, held a fragile spark of the boy who danced at the school ceremony, but they were heavy with loss. Clara, his mother, lay still under a tarp, her sacrifice a wound that would never fully heal. Jonah sat at the helm, his hands trembling on the wheel, his gaze fixed on the horizon, unable to look at his son or his wife's body, the weight of his past smuggling days crushing him. Officer Lopez lay against the rail, his breathing shallow, the syringe's poison sapping his strength, but his grip on Sarah's hand was firm, a silent vow to hold on. The platform's explosion still echoed in Sarah's ears, its fireball a fading glow behind them, the aquarelle project reduced to twisted metal sinking into the sea. Her arm throbbed where Clara's syringe had struck, but the pain was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. Clara's betrayal, her redemption, the townsfolk lost in those tanks. She'd promised Eli justice, and though the lab was gone, the truth was a heavier burden. The harbor came into view, fishing boats bobbing, townsfolk gathering as word of the night's chaos spread. Sarah's radio crackled. Carter, the rookie, shouting, "Captain, we've got ambulances ready. The bunkers secured, evidence bagged." Sarah's voice was hoarse. "Get a stretcher for Lopez and a coroner." Silence followed, then a choked, "Yes, ma'am." The boat docked, medics swarming, their hands gentle as they lifted Lopez onto a gurney, his eyes fluttering open to mutter, "Kick their asses, Cap." Sarah managed a grim smile, squeezing his hand before turning to Eli. He clung to her, trembling, as medics checked his vitals, their faces paling at the fading scales. Jonah stepped ashore, carrying Clara's body, his shoulders bowed, townsfolk parting in stunned silence. Sarah guided Eli to an ambulance, his small hand in hers, and whispered, "You're safe now." But his eyes searched the crowd, landing on a familiar face. Mrs. Harrow, his teacher from the ceremony, who knelt, tears streaming, and hugged him. The town was broken, but it was home. Hours later, Sarah sat in the police station, the vest from the wheat field on her desk, its scales dull, lifeless. Evidence from the bunker files, hard drives piled high, painting a grim picture. The Aquarelle project, funded by a shadow corporation, had targeted Havens Creek for its isolated coast, experimenting on the vulnerable, promising cures for illnesses like the one Clara feared Eli had. The lab coat man, identified as Dr. Elias Vaughn, was dead, his body unrecovered. But his data named accomplices local officials, smugglers, even a Coast Guard mole. Sarah's team arrested 3 that day, their confessions cracking the conspiracy wide open. News vans descended, headlines screaming, Havens horror, but Sarah cared only for justice. She visited Eli in the hospital, his room bright with drawings from classmates, his skin now smooth, though scars remained. He smiled, shy, holding a new paper crown, and Sarah's throat tightened. She saw the boy from a year ago, not E7. Jonah sat beside him, sober, vowing to rebuild, to be the father Eli deserved. Lopez, recovering down the hall, gave Sarah a thumbs up, his humor intact. Weeks passed, and Havens Creek began to heal. The school reopened, kids laughing again, though memorials for Clara and the lost stood in the town square, flowers piling high. Sarah testified in court, her voice steady as Vaughn's accomplices faced charges, the corporation dismantled, its assets seized to fund victims' care. She walked the wheat field one evening, the air clean, no hum, no shadows. Eli was there, running with friends, his laughter carrying over the stalks. Sarah paused, the vest's weight gone from her shoulders, replaced by a quiet peace. She'd failed Clara, but not Eli, not her town. The sea glittered under the setting sun, and for the first time in a year, Sarah breathed easy, knowing justice had prevailed, and Havens Creek would rise again. From a haunting vest to a shattered lab, Eli's rescue exposed a town's dark secrets, bringing justice and healing. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications for our newest gripping stories.